And welcome back, everyone, to the 12th installment, the 12th episode of the Tentative Monologues with me, Rodion Romanich Raskolnikov, a former law student turned cold-blooded murderer. But no spoilers just yet. Anyway, today we will be talking about Crime and Punishment, a literary great. If we're talking books in prose, this is Russian prose written by the one and only Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of the greatest writers ever to grace the earth. And this book focuses on the duality between crime and punishment, and whether punishment applies equally for every crime, or whether it applies differently to different people considering their own morality and how they accept things. So it's brilliant how he is able to, in depth and in a nuanced way, but obviously through literature, get into the human condition, especially through times of turmoil, like when you've wronged society or when you've wronged yourself. It's a very powerful book, and today I'll be sharing a few aspects of it in what I think will be a series of parts, nitpicking certain concepts from the book because it's huge. It's 600 pages, Russian prose, just Dostoevsky banging this idea into your head. But yes, so today we'll be talking about Rodion himself in this one particular article. Raskolnikov, the main character of the book, in this one particular article he published before he dropped out, basically, of university and then released himself of his law studies. It's a very interesting article that ties into essentially his entire suffering. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into the book. I feel like I've already spoiled it enough. So sit back, enjoy, relax, and yes, welcome back to TTM.
When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee. And then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings.
So, yes, Crime and Punishment. It is set in St. Petersburg, Russia, in the 19th century. And like I mentioned in the intro, it is based on Raskolnikov, a young, impoverished law student, or former law student rather, because he had dropped out right at the beginning of the book in St. Petersburg, Russia, who was also a publisher and a translator for certain books, but a budding publisher who had published a certain article on the difference between punishment exacted on two different groups of people within society. Now, these groups are your extraordinary man and your ordinary man. And in his article, he elaborates that he believes the extraordinary man, the likes of your Napoleon, the likes of your Adolf Hitlers, these are people who truly believe that they are unique and powerful and influential in a vain way, but they do as a matter of fact, effect change. And because of this, any crime they commit with the intention of working towards that purpose, so say maybe Napoleon, for instance, with the amount of killing he did as the general of the French army, using it to overturn the absolutist monarchy of King Louis, right? Louis the 13th. How for him killing didn't affect him because talent doesn't necessarily equate to morality. That's another concept that I think a lot of people need to juggle with. I heard this from Kendrick Lamar. Talent doesn't necessarily equate to morality. So these people of course he meant it from a different context, but in the context of a person like Napoleon, and what I think Raskolnikov in the book and in his article was trying to get to was that these people could kill just for the sake of serving their purpose, and that wouldn't affect them in any way. And that differentiates them from the ordinary man who has a conscience, whose consciousness would engulf them in sorrow and remorse, even if it wasn't intentional. That's how powerful the conscience is. You can run away from penal servitude, you can run away from jail, you can run away from the law, but you will never run away from your mind if you're a moral person. So anyway, Raskolnikov, to get himself out of this impoverished position, decides to kill a pawnbroker who would pawn things for money, items for money, like gold and silver and necklaces, bracelets, whatever it is. So he decided to murder her with an axe, and by proxy murdered her sister who happened to walk in, unfortunately, whilst he was committing the murder. Having done this, he didn't even bring himself to take any of the money that he thought, would serve him a purpose of him, beginning his great journey as the ordinary man, because him killing the pawnbroker wasn't him only saying that he needed financial help, but also the fact that he wanted to find out if his theory is correct and whether he falls into the category of extraordinary people who are capable of anything, even murder, for their purpose to be achieved. But after doing this, after killing the old woman, he gets into his mind and it eats him for the entirety of the book. He turns into this delirious, monomanic person who is absolutely crazy, and that is because all that is at the back of his mind, all that is in his subconscious mind, all that is eating his conscience is the fact that he has killed this lady, this poor old pawnbroker, for absolutely nothing. Because even after he had killed her, all of the financial goods that she had, her assets and stuff, and basically the stuff that she had pawned that he could go and sell for the money that he needed, he hid them under a rock somewhere. He couldn't even bring himself to take the money. So the whole purpose of the killing was defunct. It was pointless. And it gets to a point in the book where, let me preface this by saying he meets a man called Marmeladov right at the beginning of the book, whilst he's still going around St. Petersburg, and meets Marmeladov in a bar. And they get to talking about life in general, but Marmeladov gives him an in-depth analysis of his life and his children and everything like that. So at some point, Marmeladov, later on in the book, but very later on in the book, Marmeladov dies in the street being trounced upon by a horse carriage, right? So Raskolnikov decides to help and, even donate some of the money that he had received from his mother, who was also impoverished, and, it took a lot for her to give this money to Raskolnikov, but, he was in a state of delirium. So he gives this money to Marmeladov's family to help them out. I assume in an effort to make himself feel, or rather to start cancelling out what he felt was the moral debt that he did to himself by killing that old pawnbroker lady. Because remember, he figured that he was an extraordinary man, right? He figured that he was an extraordinary man, but after killing the woman and coming face to face with his conscience, he realized that he isn't. He doesn't have that lack of morality that these people have. He's not decrepit of morality simply because he's intelligent, or he's not a great, and that ate him. I think that's what destroyed him even more than the fact that he had killed for no reason, was the fact that it didn't confirm to him that his vanity was correct. It didn't confirm to him that him being a narcissist his whole life, being this intelligent young man that many people would always, trounce blessings upon, trounce praise upon for being so brilliant and eloquent in everything that he did. And now he, presented his, of course, even his most closest friend. You've got Razumikin, a person who really took care of him and even took care of his sister and his mother when they came to St. Petersburg after hearing about his condition. So that's the part that in the book Dostoevsky tries to show us, the ordinary man, and how the ordinary man, I guess, embodied by Raskolnikov, would react to something like having committed a murder, but realizing afterwards that that doesn't equate to morality at all. It doesn't give you a bigger sense of morality or confirm some sort of superiority inside your mind. But anyway, he meets Marmeladov, and at Marmeladov's funeral, he meets his daughters, and one of them was Sonia. And Sonia becomes a very important piece in the puzzle later on in the book, in the later stages of building up to the end and afterwards the epilogue. Sonia was a prostitute. Her father was a public servant, but of course wasn't very good. And as you remember, I mentioned that when Raskolnikov met him, they were in a bar and he was way beyond drunk, and even his death was caused by his drunkenness, because he was drunk and walked in front of a horse carriage and it trounced upon him. But anyway, that's besides the point. So he wasn't providing for his family much. They were quite impoverished. So Sonia had to become the man of the house, essentially. And unfortunately, she was a harlot. So through prostitution, she was the one basically who brought financial stability, or some semblance of it, to support her ailing stepmother, who was also running rabid because she had come from an aristocratic family and had fallen to this level of impoverishment because of her husband. So it's intense. So Sonia has to carry all these burdens, and through prostitution, that's how she brings in sustenance. So Raskolnikov, after the funeral, builds rapport with her and sees within her a similar suffering to him. But he notes something that for me I found very profound, an epiphany almost. He notes that Sonia has suffered and has made herself suffer, but that suffering was pointless. She made herself suffer needlessly. She destroyed herself for absolutely nothing by going into prostitution and trying to provide for her family. But it wasn't her job. She had parents to take care of that. She could have pursued an education, being a very smart woman. As the book alludes to, you can sort of connect the dots. So Raskolnikov points this out to her, and in this conversation that they were having, I guess it looked like torment to her, because she didn't understand why Raskolnikov, this person who just helped out with my father's funeral, is here tormenting me psychologically. But I think Raskolnikov was projecting rather than trying to find something out in Sonia, but was really looking at himself through Sonia. So not only does Dostoevsky show the perspective of man fighting his conscience after committing such an egregious crime, but also shows man's undying desire for pain, or to exact pain, to exact punishment. And Raskolnikov notes that, Sonia's suffering was completely pointless. He didn't need to go into prostitution. So that's one type of suffering that has been put upon oneself for absolutely no reason, whereas his is confirmed by the fact that he actually did do something. He took someone else's life away to confirm his vanity that didn't even exist there. When he came to the surface of things. So it's amazing to see how they contrast Sonia with Raskolnikov, and how Dostoevsky goes about it, because now here these two people who have gone through deep and serious suffering, but at two different ends of the spectrum. But in any case, because of this, Raskolnikov hadn't told anyone that he had killed the pawnbroker lady, and I think that was also something that contributed to his delirium, because he had not told anyone that he killed the lady. So everyone was weirded out by his new delirious state and how he was, he would lock himself in his room for days on end without eating, without waking up, without talking to anyone. At times he would just fly off and sneak out of the building whilst his landlady's assistant and also his friend would be looking over him. And a buddying doctor from the university, Zosimov, as well, who was the one who basically diagnosed him with monomania and delirium, and took after him. So Raskolnikov was very standoffish at this point because of this mental turmoil that he had in his head. He was really put off. So bringing in Sonia is contradictory, but understands his suffering from a different perspective. So Sonia was the only person he felt he could confide in, and as such, Sonia was the only person he told this entire thing to, that he had killed, and that the most famous case in St. Petersburg of the old pawnbroker lady who was killed with an axe, that was done by him, and that the person who had confessed at the police station earlier on to the one of the police officers, Porfy Petrovich, was basically lying and was in a state of delirium because he had felt guilty for something else that he had done. And so because of the incessant questioning and of interrogation, you end up just believing that, yes, maybe I did kill the woman, but it was Raskolnikov, of course. But anyway, Sonia then is Raskolnikov's salvation, because she tells him that you've done this crime. You've not disappointed, but rather you've betrayed yourself. Yes, you've betrayed yourself for no reason, to no avail, because it didn't confirm your theory. You didn't get money from it. But now you are serving this serious, very deep punishment within your mind that's trying to push you towards something. And Sonia says in her mind that she really believed that all he had to do was to go and confess to the policeman and serve his time in prison, and only that would clean his heart. Only that would make him whole again, because even though he was cynical and standoffish, Sonia could still tell that within him some desire to continue with life was still there. Whereas extraordinary people, I believe if they were to be faced with something like Raskolnikov's situation where their ideas or their plans fail, they wouldn't even be bothered. But anyway, that's besides the point. Anyway, let's get back to this. So Sonia encourages him to go to the police officers and confess that he was the one who did the murder, and that would clean his conscience. And so he does this. He goes and does this, and that's basically what happens. So he gets prison time, and in the epilogue they describe how the court case went and how he didn't get a life sentence for murder or even capital punishment because he was in a state of delirium, and this could be proven, and he did this because he was impoverished, so there was the intention was established behind it and everything, even though deep within him he knows that wasn't the case. That's what because he said it himself even in the court trial, that what his intent was, but it was proven, it's like, because you can't take his word. He was delirious, manic, so that's it. So he was only given a sentence of 8 years. And Sonia, after the conversations they had before, when she was encouraging him to go and confess, basically they fostered love, because here were these two people who were in similar situations, and they could only confide into each other, and they just promised each other that they would go with each other to the world's end, whatever the circumstance. And so, being taken to the Siberian steppe for imprisonment, Sonia also came with him and established herself in Siberia until after his penal servitude, of course, which we don't, we're not privy to in the book. But what we do get to, I think, is his second year in prison, where he does confirm finally that he loves Sonia, and happily ever after, I guess, having defeated, well, not defeated, but having served his punishment for the crime that he committed. So for every crime you commit in life, for every, not even a crime per se, for every person you wrong, karma, karmic dirt, all these things, they build up and they will come back. And even if you escape penal servitude, if you are not one of these people, one of these great people who narcissistically, deeply believe that they are saviors of the world somehow, and that them killing is just an obstacle for them to spread their message. If you are not capable of that mindset, then your mind, your conscience, you're human. And as much as you believe you're in control of your faculties, they can turn on you in an instant. You are not. You are not. That's why you have nightmares. That's why you have sleep paralysis. That's why you've got stuff like stress when you encounter failure. That's why you've got stuff like stress when you go through heartbreak. That's why you've got depression. These are things that, we can't find the root to, but we do know what the cause is. We can't get to the root to heal it or anything like that, but we do know what the cause is, and the cause is a battle with your conscience. That's one fight man has never won and will probably never win. So that's the ordinary man. The extraordinary man in the book, how the extraordinary man is shown, is through the admirers and basically quarters of Raskolnikov's sister, Dunya. Dunya is also a brilliant young lady who was absolutely beautiful, but obviously because of their impoverished state had to find ways to contribute to the family and contribute to her brother's education. So she encountered a man called Svidrigailov. These Russian names are difficult. Svidrigailov was married to a noble woman who was very rich, and he then inherited all of her wealth upon her passing. But before she had passed, Dunya, Raskolnikov's sister, worked as a servant in their house, and obviously being attractive, Svidrigailov was very crass. I should mention a little background. He raped a deaf and blind child who was also a servant in the house, and also abused a mute servant of his, ended up killing him with a gun. So, and also killed his wife as well. But he denies this abhorrently, but then he poisoned her because he felt that his wife was an obstacle to his love for Dunya. And where she killed, then Dunya would be free game and he would get Dunya, right? So keep in mind the extraordinary man, right? This is how they operate. Now, especially Svidrigailov, because at this point he had amassed wealth by virtue of being married to his wife. So he had power, he had influence. And he tried on many attempts to court Dunya, but Dunya wasn't, she really wasn't about that. So the wife, before she died, tried to connect Dunya with a man called Luchin, one of the two. Luchin was also a very rich person connected to the noble woman, so married Dunya off to her. So Svidrigailov, on top of simply just desiring Dunya, also wanted to murder his wife because he had banished Dunya essentially to a separate marriage that he wasn't involved in. And for the extraordinary man, that's a no. So an obstacle killed his wife. There you go. So he comes back. He comes to St. Petersburg and tracks down Raskolnikov. And by some coincidence, whilst Raskolnikov was confessing to Sonia what he had done, Svidrigailov was in the next door, and so the walls were thin because, of course, this isn't prime real estate. These people are impoverished. The walls were thin, so he could hear what was being said, and so after this, he finds Raskolnikov and torments him over this. Once again, Raskolnikov is an obstacle to getting to his sister. So through his tormenting of Raskolnikov, he thinks that he'll get some way through to his sister and offers Dunya money from the estate of his wife. This, I'm not sure why. Maybe he feels because he's wealthy, he can just flaunt his money. I have no idea. But anyway, of course, Raskolnikov rejects this, his money and finance. And also, he even tries to help Raskolnikov out of his circumstances, tries to give him money so that he can flee to America and flee penal servitude. But Raskolnikov, of course, denies this because he knows that behind this is simply the fact that by Raskolnikov taking his favor, he'd owe him, and Dunya would be the payment. So that's how the extraordinary man thinks in this book. So you can see how Dostoevsky is showing these different people coming into interaction with each other, going through the different, torments and turmoils mentally. And it's incredible. I mean, I've been blabbering about it for 22 minutes now, but I'm not selling you what I read over the last week. It was incredible. So that's what happens to Svidrigailov. So anyway, in any case, he ends up getting to Dunya, and Dunya finally confirms to him that all those fantasies that he had, those nostalgic memories of him and her talking, when she was still a servant before the wife banished her because she could tell that Svidrigailov really was fond of Dunya. That Dunya also had feelings for Svidrigailov, but Dunya categorically denied it. That Svidrigailov was being delusional, that they never had a fling, that they never had any romantic ties. He was just seeing things because he wanted to see them. He was narcissistic. He believed himself to be, going back to that idea, the extraordinary man. And for the first time in the book, because Svidrigailov was always a neutral character who never really showed remorse for any of the stuff he did, except for his wife in conversation with some people, but he never really showed remorse. He would just, if you accused him of any of the allegations that were brought forth on him, you just, push them down quickly. It's like, that's nonsensical, So that's how he always thought. So this was the first moment in the book, this scene between him finally, for the final time, encountering Dunya. The tension behind it is it's palpable. And Dunya at some point, so they end up in quarters, both of them on their own. I'm trying my best not to spoil the book for you. They end up in the quarters, in his quarters, just the both of them on their own. And Svidrigailov even mentions that Dunya is very brave for coming on her own to come and see a man in his quarters. What is she relying on? So after Dunya finally shatters his dreams, he rushes to her and tries to grab hold of her, trying to get some dying embers of hope, not some love is there. Dunya pulls out a gun and points it directly at Svidrigailov, and this is the first time we see him shattered as a man. But it's not so much that he was scared of Dunya, it's more so that he confirmed that Dunya didn't love him. And if Dunya didn't love him, the subject of all his desires, the reason why he did everything that he did, he tormented Raskolnikov, gave him the money, killed his wife, who gave him wealth, after all, just for Dunya. That's how much he loved Dunya. He cleared all the obstacles, being from what he believed was his extraordinary, capacity. Cleared all the obstacles in the way just to get to Dunya. And when he finally gets to his goal, Dunya says, "I don't love you." Even shoots at him, but luckily the bullet was a little stray, so it only grazed the top of his head, such that he bled a bit. And so he even gets livid and tells Dunya to just leave. just leave before, his mind changes. And after this, he then murders himself. He murders himself with the same gun, because I believe that his purpose was done. He got to the same end as Raskolnikov. Maybe this is Dostoevsky. Maybe there's something that we can discuss, you and I, listener, rather, is whether this is Dostoevsky saying that, debunking Raskolnikov's entire theory, because here's the extraordinary man then in St. Petersburg in a similar context to Raskolnikov, clearing all the obstacles, getting to his goal, but then being denied it and killing himself. So that's one way to deal with your punishment, is to run away from it. And that's one thing Raskolnikov couldn't do, because he rejected Svidrigaïlov's help, and he could have run away on his own accord as well, but he didn't. He stayed and he faced his punishment. Whereas Svidrigaïlov was like, there's no point, there's nothing to live for anymore at this point. Dunya is gone, so he then murders himself. So maybe it is debunked that both the extraordinary man and the ordinary man will eventually meet punishment at some point, or some sort of block that really just ends all your ambitions. Because if you think about it, Napoleon was also imprisoned. Che Guevara was murdered, assassinated. Castro survived many assassination attempts. You name it. Most of these people that were extraordinary and killed to, spread their message, eventually came to never really realize their ambitions in the end. So was all that vanity justified? Look at Hitler. Hitler did the same thing Svidrigaïlov did, killed himself right at the end of it. It's like, I didn't achieve the Third Reich's visions, so what's the point of going on living to face my punishment after doing everything that I have done? So he just killed himself. So maybe that's the difference, that the ordinary man cannot kill themselves because they believe that they can still go back to their old moral self even after corrupting that moral self by, causing a crime like murder or stuff. And the extraordinary man simply cannot bring themselves to be ordinary. If they feel that they have a mission, they will achieve that mission. And if they don't achieve that mission, that means their whole life and their whole purpose is pointless. They might as well just die and kill themselves. So it's amazing. And this is just only a few of the dynamics in the book that I can talk about, freestyle about for 30 minutes off the top of my head. I can only imagine what you will get from the book. But honestly, this was the first thriller ever, if you think about it, because it was the first literary thriller, the first thriller written, the first psychological thriller written in Russian prose. Then that means, because if it was in the 19th century, this was before films and cinema. This means Crime and Punishment was the first ever thriller, psychological thriller, and it is perfect. If time could be quantified by us humans, I mean, considering the fact that we are only on this earth for a speck of time, we don't know anything beyond us or before us. So it's amazing. But in any case, I can concur that this is probably one of the greatest books of all time. One of, if not the, and I've heard that Dostoevsky's got even better books, like the brothers Karamazov and the likes, White Knights, you name it, Notes from the Underground. So I'll be seeping into it more. But that was Crime and Punishment, and that was man's fight with his conscience if man escapes penal servitude, and also man finally getting to penal servitude, because I mean that's the only way you can really redeem yourself and feel some sort of salvation and feel that you've rebuilt your moral bank account, because if you feel there's no hope, then there's no point in going forward. You might as well just kill yourself and end it right there and then. And Crime and Punishment doesn't only apply to capital punishment. It looks at man's struggle with themselves once you've betrayed yourself, once you've say, for instance, faced academic exclusion because you developed alcoholism throughout the year because you were trying to protest against the institution being biased against you. Next thing you know, you failed, and at what cost? You lost your scholarship, you've got debt, you can't go out, and you've betrayed yourself for absolutely nothing because your protest achieved nothing but only get you ill and get you into weird circumstances, in a weird position for the rest of your life, because this will be a speck on your professional record for the rest of your life. It can apply to heartbreak. Be careful what you do. Be careful what you say to other people. Be careful how you hurt other people. Be careful your words. People's blood, people's tears aren't just shed freely. Karma exists. And if karma isn't exacted on you, your mind will exact it on you. You will torture yourself without even realizing it. Without even trying, without even being intentional about it, you will torture yourself for ruining another person's life, for hurting another person. So be careful what you do in this life, and try your best not to be so vain that you believe that you are superior to others and as such can do anything to another human being, because it will come back to haunt you one way or the other. Either you will die and kill yourself for fear of not being able to face your failure, or you will face your failure and its consequences eventually. Even if you succeed at first with whatever it is that you are trying to achieve, you will face your failure and its full wrath eventually. And that's all I learned from Crime and Punishment, and what a beautiful book. I really wish and hope that you'll pick it up at some point in your life. It's one of those once in a lifetime experiences, or rather it's one of those experiences that one must have in their lives. Thank you very much for tuning in, and until next time.